You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is Renee Knight. The Renegade Star Series, books 1 through 3 by J.N. Chaney. Jace Hughes is a renegade. That means taking almost any job that comes his way, no matter the situation. So long as he can keep his ship floating, he's free to live the life he wants. But that all changes when he meets Abigail Pryor, a nun looking for safe passage out of the system. Too bad there's something off about the cargo she's carrying. Jace knows he shouldn't ask too many questions, but when odd sounds start coming from inside the large metal box, he can't help but check it out. Big mistake. The Renegade Star box set includes the first 3 books in the series, 900 plus pages, 300 5-star reviews and counting. Find out why people are so intrigued by this thrilling science fiction epic. You won't believe the twists and turns this series takes, or the secrets that get revealed. The Renegade Star Series by J.N. Chaney. Devin Ford, Recon, the Expansion Series, Book 1. Hundreds of years in Earth's future sees the United Global Territories striving to colonize the Moon and Mars. The discovery of a clean energy source ended the world's reliance on fossil fuels overnight, and years after the resulting wars, a new discovery puts the tenuous world peace at risk, that of faster-than-light travel. With humanity on the verge of traveling to new solar systems and all the humanitarian and scientific possibilities involved, a discovery by the reconnaissance team turns everything upside down. Join the small team of the reconnaissance mission who fight friend and foe to complete their mission objectives, no matter where it leads them or what the personal cost. Devin Ford, Recon, the Expansion Series, Book 1. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Renee Knight on the show with me today. She has a fantastic new book called The Secretary, and this is one of those books that when you go to bed at night and you close your eyes, this book will not leave you alone. I promise you that. Welcome to the show, Renee.
Thank you very much for having me, Hank.
I'm excited to have you. Renee, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Well, I suppose, I don't think I thought of it consciously this way at the time, but I remember in primary school, probably round about the age of 8, we were all asked to do a kind of précis, a little précis, or a sort of book blurb, although I don't think they called it a book blurb, of a book we just enjoyed reading, and then to write something out and then read it out to the class. And I suppose in a way, for me, it was like, in a way, a kind of pitch. So I sort of found myself really wanting to persuade my classmates that they should read this book. And I suppose I was a very shy child, and I think it's one of the few times I remember speaking out in class, and people being able to hear me, actually. And I always loved reading as a child. I wasn't particularly, I left school when I was 16, so I didn't have a sort of glittering academic career, but reading was always something that I loved. And I remember actually trying to write my own book, which was a complete plagiarism, actually, another book that I'd loved as a child, but sort of, recreating it in my own words with my own illustrations and things. So I suppose, it was when I was quite young, but I didn't consciously think I want to be a writer.
Right. Well, that happens to a lot of folks. It's, I believe that there's a storytelling gene, or I don't know what it is, but I think there's something that's ingrained in storytellers, and it's just something that you do. It's because it's who you are. And then if you want to be a writer, then you take that gift or whatever, and then you work on the craft to then, formally write stories. But I think that desire is kind of there from the beginning.
Yes, and I suppose, maybe as a storyteller, but also somebody who likes to be told stories, I think.
Yes.
I think you have to be quite receptive to stories yourself, don't you?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's this love of story.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. When you said you were a very avid reader, what were some of the books or genres that really grabbed hold of you?
I mean, the one I remember plagiarizing was something called The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Goudge, which really stayed with me, actually, which was kind of a mystery. It was historic drama with a bit of a sort of fantasy tone. And then I also loved, there were a whole series of books by a writer called Joan Aitken. And I remember, I think the one that I did the précis for my class was Black Hearts Over Battersea. Again, they were often, but as children's books often are, with children at their heart, at their center, going on adventures, and of course they're always parentless children, aren't they? Often, sort of,
feral
let loose
children.
into the world. Yes, exactly. So but I also was very keen on. I quite liked ghost stories and things. I was always drawn to the sort of slightly dark side. Yeah. Actually, even in children's literature.
What was your first experience or exposure to maybe thriller or, a dark mystery, that you think has hung with you, through the years?
I think there's both, actually. I mean, through books, but also we can deviate a little bit from books, presumably.
Sure.
Sort of television and film as
Absolutely.
Storytelling too. I mean, I do remember being given one Christmas, a book of sort of short stories, Dark Tales by Roald Dahl. And I remember, I think actually maybe this wasn't Roald Dahl, but I remember reading the story of the monkey's paw. Actually, maybe it wasn't Roald Dahl. Maybe that was I think it was a book of just sort of dark, ghosty stories. And the monkey's claw, I realize now, is quite a famous tale of some parents who've lost their child. The child has died, or I think it's actually quite a teenager, a grown-up child, and they wish more than anything for their son to come back. I think they get given this monkey claw, but it doesn't turn out well, actually, and the son does come back. And I remember, and I probably was only about 9 or 10, but there were also, I remember, on Friday nights on television, a series of thrillers, which I used to stay up and watch, which really chilled me, actually. And in fact, I found the box sets, which I ordered online, and they're full of sort of very shaky scenery and the same limited cast of actors who'd sort of reprise roles week after week. But they really stayed with me. I just sort of loved the chill of it, really. I don't know. It's a bit odd, I suppose.
What did you pursue when you left school? What did you think that you were going to do with your life?
I didn't know. I was clueless, actually. I really didn't know. And my father persuaded me to do a secretarial course. So I did I was reasonably good at languages. So I did a 2 years, which was quite a long time, bilingual secretarial course. And then, so that took me sort of from 16 to 18, and I learned to do French shorthand typing. And I suppose I then started to imagine I might go and live in France and get some glamorous job in Paris or something. But that didn't happen. And I then started temping, actually. And then eventually I ended up temping at the BBC. And I kind of looked up at that stage and thought, there are all these people around me with much more interesting jobs than this. And I just slowly started, I became a researcher eventually, and then worked my way up to producer. But it took a while. So when I left school and when I left secretarial college, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was lucky, actually, to have ended up at the BBC, because in a way, I suppose that did lead me. Once I started making documentaries, then, of course, that's when I had a chance to tell stories.
It's so funny. You hear stories of people that get a job somewhere and work their way up, and you literally did. You came in and then just kind of became part of the process from the inside, huh?
Yes, I did. I mean, I think it was probably easier then.
Yeah.
I think it was easier in those days. And I suppose if you're committed and you're prepared to sort of do these jobs for, not being paid to do them
That
for
helps
a period of years.
That helps too, doesn't it?
That helps,
Yeah.
exactly. Cheap labor. But yes. So, yeah, I mean, I think it probably was easier then than it would be now. Although I suspect in television, actually, that does still happen. That does still happen.
You said it was very, you could kind of see the path now when you got to working on documentary. That is documentaries are some of the most powerful forms of storytelling. Do you see the connection now looking back at, learning to, have an idea and then, building the case, I guess, around the idea and how the structure of documentary is very much a narrative structure?
Yes, absolutely, and particularly the editing stage, which I really loved, actually, more than the filming. The filming, I mean, with the filming, particularly with documentaries, it's often very difficult to control, and so you just have to go with it, obviously, a lot of the time. And I found myself often more interested by what was happening on the fringes, sort of, what wasn't on screen, actually, in a way, what you weren't filming, than the actual sort of the thing you were supposed to be filming. So it might be I remember filming too, I was doing a series on shopping, actually, when we were looking at the history of mail order shopping. And we interviewed these two elderly, probably both in their mid to late 70s, sisters, who were fantastic, actually, talking about, their catalogue shopping. But it was all the preparation before of the way they greeted us into their home, the way they served us tea, the way they sort of chatted off camera that interested me more. And then actually once you're in the editing stage, it's then in a way that you have real control over the story and you realize how you can send it in so many different directions, which is, of course, is what you can do with a book, actually. So it's actually trying to sort of focus in on what is it you're trying to say, or what is it in the case of documentary that they're trying to say. And getting that across. But absolutely, it is something I think of now when I'm writing, and particularly when I'm editing, is going back to being in a cutting room with all that material and just working out how best to use it.
I'm always fascinated by the intersection of these different artistic expressions, and the, when you break it down, storytelling is king, and some of us, express, and share, those things through painting or dance or documentary film or writing fiction. But when you break it down, we're all trying to connect with others on some emotional level.
Yes, absolutely. No, I think that's absolutely right. And in a way, the joy of writing books, or what it has been, I mean, I've only written 2, but actually what's been so nice is, unlike television, I mean, it's different now with television because there's Twitter and things, so you do get a sense of what your audience think. But in the days when I was making documentaries, you didn't really know, whereas actually with books, you really do make a connection with people. You often get to meet them. There are literary festivals, there are ways of meeting those who read your books. And it's, that's really nice to feel that connection, actually. It's great.
Yeah, well, especially for writers who spend so much solitary time working on a story. It's a very solitary experience until it goes out to the world, and then your book becomes this community thing. And it's so bizarre.
Yeah, it is. It is bizarre. I mean, it's kind of nice. I mean, it's very nice that it's out there, but it is, yes, you sort of brace yourself. But yes, it's strange because, as you say, it's so solitary. It's so solitary. Yeah. And for one, it's just been you and your editor.
Right.
But yes, going out to sort of new readers and to friends and family when they're suddenly reading it, it's it's very strange, but nice. Thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly.
Better than it just drops into a dark hole and disappears.
Right. The writing is just the beginning of the roller coaster. But when your time at the BBC, did you transition into writing fiction works, or was it all documentary?
It was all documentary. And actually, the actual script writing I did, I mean, I would write commentary for the documentaries, but it was minimal. So it was only actually when I left the BBC, and I had children and I was at home for a while, and then the children were going to school full time, that I actually sat down and I started writing scripts, actually screenplays, because that felt closest to what I'd done. And in a weird way, I mean, it was a way to express myself, I suppose, but it also felt like quite a pragmatic thing to do. What can I do now? What can I do from home? And it felt, writing was the thing. So I didn't sort of suddenly think, right, now is my chance, to write the book I've always wanted. Initially, it was a sort of really tiptoeing in quite a pragmatic way. And I just wrote a screenplay at my kitchen table. And then I sent it out and I managed to get an agent. And I wrote probably 2 or 3 with limited success. Things got commissioned, but nothing ever got made. And then I started writing some short stories, because actually I did really want to write prose, but I hadn't quite had the confidence up until then to do that. So I wrote some short stories, and then I wrote a novel, which I sent to my the film and television agent, who by that stage had moved to a bigger agency where there were literary agents as well. And I asked her whether she would, if she thought it was good enough, if she would show it to one of the literary agents there, which she did, and then they took me on. So that was kind of the beginning for me. But it was, it was quite a long time after I'd left the world of documentaries. Well, probably 8 years, actually. 8 years after I left the world of documentaries. So, and quite a long time of just sort of working away on my own, just getting on with it, actually, which is not a bad thing to do.
No, absolutely not. What were some of your first fiction ideas? What were you? What was the direction? Maybe not specifics, but kind of what was the direction you were heading toward? What was the thing that excited you about writing fiction?
Well, it was again going back to the things that I'd loved when I was a child, actually. So the first screenplay I wrote was quite dark, and it was about a traumatized child who we are seeing everything through her point of view, and we're in her fantasy world, basically, where she thinks she's on holiday with her parents, but actually she isn't, and she has suffered a traumatic loss, which was sort of slowly revealed as towards the end of the screenplay. And that was the first one that got me my agent. And seemed to be quite well received. I recently, I suppose a year or 2 ago now, turned it into a short story. So I did go back to it. And I think maybe because my children were quite young at the time, the next one I did was about a sort of strange school with a very odd headmistress. Was the next one. So it was that sort of dark territory involving children, actually. Yes, I'm trying to think.
That's one of the reasons I like to talk about those early influences, is because invariably they all seem to come full circle, and those initial things that get us excited and really wake us up to storytelling just kind of tend to hang with us for a long time.
I think that's right. I think sort of nobody reads like a child, actually, and I think as a child you really, I don't know, there's a freedom of mind to really disappear into a story and really sort of smell it and feel it that perhaps as an adult, as much as we'd like to, we don't quite do in the same way. So books, I read as a child, are really still really embedded in me.
Well, and no one sees the world like a child. No,
absolutely. Absolutely.
So what was the your first novel? When did that? I'm sorry.
No. I was going to say the first one I wrote that got me the literary agent didn't ever get published, actually.
Interesting.
It was it was strange, actually. She was very confident. I mean, when I look back now, I'm glad it didn't, because I can see it wasn't good enough. It got sort of, nice comments from publishers, but nobody wanted to buy it. And I suspect it was too close to me. It was about a sort of an incident involving a friend of mine. I think looking back, it was probably too autobiographical. It wasn't exactly autobiographical, but it was too close to me. And it was set around an incident with a friend of mine when we were about 15. Somebody who I'm still friends with, actually, but who lives in the States. And I think it was just I think I was so excited about writing a book, and I really enjoyed writing it. And I think I was too quick to get it out there as well, actually. I think I don't know. But I'm glad I did it. And in a way, that experience, another friend of mine was writing a book at the same time. And in fact, she was the one who encouraged me to move from writing screenplays to writing a novel. I'd said I was quite keen to write a novel, and she said, just do it. And she said, I'm going to email you every Friday, and you're going to tell me how many words you've written. And so she really spurred me on, and she was writing her novel at the same time. And we finished our books at the same time, and we submitted them to our agents at the same time. And within a week, her book had been snapped up, and there was a publishers fighting over it. My book, I still hadn't heard a peep. So it was quite a bracing experience, and it did. I mean, I'm glad for it, because it did make me realize, if you want to do this, you've got to have a very thick skin, and you've really got to want to do it. And so that first book just sort of languished, but it did give me the idea for the next book, actually. So, I feel nothing is wasted. It's all good experience.
Of course. And it's so weird that that first novel that a lot of people write tends to be more autobiographical. It's like we have all these life experiences, and we're kind of processing everything through our own life experience. And sometimes you just kind of have to get that out, and let those characters go and let them have their say. And then the next thing that comes along is where that pure, fiction comes from.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think it is. It is a sort of clearing out process, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
And there's nothing to that can replace the experience of getting from the beginning through the middle and to the end of a novel and finishing it. You can't put a price on the experience of doing it, because until then you're never a novelist. But once you've made it to the end, you are a writer. Now, we're all constantly working on the craft, but we've done it.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's true, actually. And also when you start out, you don't necessarily know that you're going to have the stamina to finish it.
Exactly.
So it is a thing to get to the end. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there are probably lots of people with brilliant first chapters, aren't there? But
yes.
It is.
Look, I am the master of the first chapter. Let me tell you, I can write a first chapter that will have you in tears, and I have a hard drive full of first chapters, and I have several finished novels as well, but there's the excitement of that new book and first chapter is very enticing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But when it came to writing the second one, I actually then also signed up to do a creative writing class, which I hadn't done before. And I did think, am I silly to do this? I've got an agent. What am I worrying about? And actually, I'm so glad I did it. It was just a joy, because even though, as you say, I had written a book, even though it hadn't got published, and I suppose I could call myself a writer, I didn't feel comfortable yet doing that. And it was very nice to sort of get back in the saddle in a way, and to write the second one as part of a group, and as part in a sort of more structured process, so I wasn't just sort of locked away on my own again. I mean, we only met, it was only once a week, 2 hours in the evening once a week. But I really, really loved it. It was one of my happiest times, I think, actually, being part of that.
One thing that's great about a writer's group is not only the ability to kind of pitch ideas to other people and to get immediate feedback and to some course correction can come out of that. But there's also this kind of strange thing that happens when creative people get together and ideas, grow exponentially.
Yes,
with other creative people. And it's a great environment just to get your batteries charged up again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we were it was a formal course. It was run by the publishing company over here, Faber. Yeah. So, everyone had made a commitment in a way to be there, but it was quite a mixed group because it was in the evenings. Most of the people there had full-time jobs, which was great, actually. So you had a real, there was a doctor there was a speechwriter there, there was somebody who'd already had 4 or 5 novels published and had stopped. And she did the course because she'd had a big break, and I think she'd lost confidence, and it helped her get back into it again. So it was a real mix. But yes, as you say, just listening to other people's stories, inspires your own, actually. Yeah, no, it was wonderful, actually. And I still see them, this was a while ago, but I still see a few of them. We still regularly meet up.
Yeah. And that first book that was published and was kind of the breakout was Disclaimer, right?
That's right. Yes, that's right.
Tell me about that story.
Well, that came about because the first novel that didn't get published, as I said, was sort of set around something that happened with a friend I was at school with during our adolescence. And I'd sent it off to her to read when I sent it off to my agent, because I suddenly thought, my goodness, what if it ever got published? And I hadn't told her that I was writing this book. And she took ages. So I posted it off to her. I didn't, I printed it all out and sent her a proper sort of, nice copy. And she took ages and ages and ages to get back to me. And the longer she took, the more anxious I became that either I'd really offended her or, she was never going to speak to me again. And I thought, and it just made me sit with that idea of, what would it be like if you picked up a book and came across yourself as the central character? And it was about, something that you thought nobody else knew. And so that's where the idea came from. And I wrote half of it when I was doing the writing course, actually. So I started the course with the idea. I hadn't started writing it. And the first 2 chapters I wrote were the first submission I made, actually, on the course. So that's, my co-writers on the Faber course were the first ones to read it. It was encouraging. It was encouraging. And I think I managed to get half of it written in the 6 months of the course. And then I finished it up afterwards. And yes, I loved writing it, actually. I did really, really enjoy reading it, but writing it. But actually, and what doing the course helped me with was not to rush, as I had last time, into sending it out. Although they'd read it on the course, I didn't send it to my agent until I'd rewritten it 2 or 3 times. That was the best advice I think I got on that course, was just leave it as long as you can and give yourself a break from it, then go back and read it, and then have another break and go back and read it, and then rewrite, which is what I did, actually. And I think that did help a lot, actually.
In going back in those rewriting processes, what do you find that you tend to do more? Are you fleshing out scenes and characters? Are you editing out? Is there something that tends to happen over and over again? Is the book getting bigger? Is it getting smaller? Is it getting tighter? What do you find is really the benefit to the rewriting process for you?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, there's a lot of taking out. But there's also sort of filling in of character, I think, for me. So in some ways, I think you can still add, but still make something tighter, as it were, actually, by just sort of sharpening it up and really testing it, actually testing your characters and constantly testing their motivation. Why would they do this? And fleshing out those characters who, may not be central to the story, but they still need to hold you for the brief time that they're there. You still need to believe in them, even if they're not there for very long. So it's a bit of both, actually, a bit of both. I mean, Disclaimer was never that long to begin with. So with that one, it was less editing out, actually. It was more sort of honing the characters and the motivation. Yeah, that's what it was.
What's so interesting is, you can work on a book and you can go through the editing process and say, oh, this book is absolutely perfect now. And then you can put it in that desk drawer for a month and come back to it and say, oh my goodness, look at all the problems with this.
Absolutely. I know. And ideally longer than a month. I mean, I know you probably don't get more than a month, but absolutely. And you see things, I know, that are horrifying. How did I let that go? But also, weirdly, you can see things. And then I think is when you know it's working that you don't remember writing. And that's always a strange thing. When you read something as if you're reading it and you haven't written it.
Oh, yeah.
Which doesn't happen very often, but it's quite nice when it does.
Well, especially when one of your characters says something profound and you're like, oh, that didn't come from me. Where did that come from?
Exactly. I can't claim that.
Yeah, it came from the ether or something, but it's fantastic. Yeah.
It is strange. Although I still think, I've never, that thing, I mean, I think actually I have a character saying that in Disclaimer that, the character writes themselves. I've never had that. It has always been, it is labor, it's hard work.
Right.
But still, sometimes that hard work can be forgotten when you're looking back and reading it.
Right. Disclaimer and your new book, The Secretary, are both psychological thrillers, these books that kind of get inside of our heads as we're watching these characters go through the things that they're going through. These types of books, this genre is really hot right now, and there are some fantastic works of literature that have come out that are just really disturbing on a human level. If we can kind of laugh at other people's pain, for a second. Why do you think that we, as the reading population are so in love with these kinds of stories?
It's strange, isn't it? I mean, I know there is a lot of it about at the moment. I mean, I think it's always been there. I suppose it's just a curiosity, isn't it, into those, the things in the dark corner of the room that you can't quite see. And maybe it is that reminder of, what it's like as a child, that sort of perhaps a primal fear. I'm not sure. I mean, people talk about people enjoying detective stories in the sense that, when the world is in a muddle, as our world is at the moment, it's good to have everything sorted out and at the end, we like sort of clarity, we like decisions, we like everything to be so nice. But that's not necessarily true with psychological thrillers. I don't know. I think they do sort of, when they're working, I think they do reflect something that is going on in the world. I think there is a sort of zeitgeisty element to them. And whether or not it's about power struggles, shifting of power, I'm not sure, but I think there's always been that interest. And I think a lot of books that aren't necessarily classified in that genre, to me, are in that genre. I mean, I think Ian McEwan, British writer Ian McEwan, I think a lot of his work, I mean, I'm sure nobody would dare call him a psychological thriller writer, but he does write psychological thrillers to me. I think they are. So I think that there's a lot more of it even than we realize, but there is a particular genre at the moment, women writing about women.
Yeah. Well, the first book was very well received. A lot of people loved the book. The new book, The Secretary, which was just out yesterday, when people are hearing this, you got some really great early praise from some of the best writers, in the genre right now. Paula Hawkins, A.J. Finn. What does it feel like to have the second book and to know that your peers appreciate what you're doing, and to get the accolades from other people that are kind of dominating the genre right now?
It's well, first of all, I feel incredibly grateful because I think it is very, very generous of them and of other writers to sort of spend the time to read another writer's book,
Right.
Because they'll have been sent it. They won't they won't have necessarily phoned up and asked for it, so they will have been sent it. So to have taken the time to read it, I think that genre as well of writers are very generous and supportive to other writers. I remember being told that very early on, and also, of course, it's a tremendous relief. Because it's out there and you just don't know for a while what anybody thinks.
Right.
So to get that from your peers is fantastic, actually. I mean, I was so grateful.
Well, and authors supporting other authors, we have to. I say all the time that we're not in competition with each other. We're all in competition with YouTube and Netflix and Facebook and Twitter, for the eyeballs and attention of readers. And anything we can do to build each other up just means we have a bigger reading audience.
No, that's absolutely right. That's a very good way of looking at it. No, that's absolutely right. And it feels, I think, that does happen, that writers support other writers.
Yeah. It's a good place to be, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the secretary. I've been itching to talk to you about this. So where I hate the question, where do ideas come from? Because ideas are all around us. You just have to, know which ones are the best ones to pull out of the air. When a story comes to you and that kind of aha idea, does it come to you as a character, as a setting, as a plot device? What is usually the germ of that story as it comes to you?
Well, it varies, actually. I mean, this one definitely came as the idea of the character, actually, whereas Disclaimer was a premise, a what if. But this was definitely the idea of the character. And she'd sort of been rattling around in my head for a while, actually. There'd been a few court cases a few years ago here where secretaries, assistants had been in court. There was a case where two secretaries were had been charged, actually, with embezzling money. And then there was another case where a secretary stood up in court in support of her. Oh, she was charged, actually. But one of the cases, actually, another secretary was charged with perverting the course of justice and was in court alongside her employer and a few other people. And it was the details that came out of these cases of the quite intimate relationships between the secretary and their employers. I mean, I'm talking about sort of high-level personal assistants, really. And it very much reminded me, it felt almost like an old-fashioned upstairs-downstairs kind of relationship of somebody who's sort of is kind of almost a friend, but not really a friend, who knows all sorts of things about their employer's life and has access to information and perhaps knows things that even, her most intimate family don't know, because, here is somebody who's a little bit involved in the personal life, but also is across everything at work too. And it's rare to get a full picture of somebody in that way.
Right. I think a lot of our listeners in the States would probably I know what you mean, upstairs, downstairs, the old television program. I think most of our listeners would be familiar with Downton Abbey, through PBS Masterpiece over the last few years, and that sort of the kind of the gentry and the employees, and how they are intimately close yet infinitely separated.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So it is, and you sort of feel that those relationships no longer exist, but they do in the office, actually. They do in the office. So, and, there are a few rare people, I'm sure, who still have butlers and maidservants, but actually the personal assistant does feel akin to those roles of being intimate with the professional and the personal life of somebody. But it is a tricky role. It's that sort of it is the old-fashioned sort of master-servant relationship. That's what I was interested in, and how that would play out in the contemporary world.
Right. But this story is not that typical upstairs, downstairs.
No.
It seems like it. And then, you turn the tables. And I don't want to give away too much of the book. So, what was the idea for the interesting power play that's going on in the book?
I suppose it's about loyalty in a way, loyalty and duty, and how far one would go, an assistant or a secretary would go to protect and do what she thinks is the right thing for her employer. But it's also about how those roles often define somebody. So they are who they are because they are needed by that other person. And I think they are sort of potentially unhealthy codependent relationships, when they become too close. The master needs their servant, their assistant. They need somebody to do their bidding. And they also, I think often with very sort of senior, with very powerful people, they do groom people to have around them who will do what they say, who will fit in. So there is a sort of particular type of person, I think, who can end up in those positions. And I think with those who are serving, as it were, they're defined by being needed in a way and by making themselves indispensable. And I think you can take that to quite a dark place. Right. Which is what I've done.
Which is what you've done, absolutely. Tell us about the character. Who do we meet in this book, and what is their motivation?
Well, the character, the secretary in the book, is a woman called Christine Butcher, who works for almost 20 years for a woman called Mina Appleton, who is, on one level, she's a businesswoman. She's British. She runs a series, or owns, her family business was in supermarkets. But she also becomes a television celebrity. So she has her own cooking lifestyle show. And she's a sort of charismatic, successful woman. And she needs Christine Butcher around her, not only to run things in the office, but Christine is the woman who, helps her hire nannies for the children, who, when she's moving home, it'll be Christine who'll be sent off to, scout out a new home for her and come up with a short list. But Christine has her own family too. So she is married. She's not the sort of, she's not married to her job in that sense. She does have a husband and she does have a child. But it's really about that progression of her abandoning, in a way, her own self and her own home and her own family, and dedicating herself to her job. And in some ways it's because actually home life can be so messy. And if you're running an office and running someone else's life, it can be easier to keep someone else's life neat and tidy. Much more difficult to do that with our own, I think, at times. And so she opts to, not consciously, but it's something that sort of slowly happens.
One thing that I really find interesting about the book and the way you tell the story is Christine and her relationship with Mina, her boss, is that a lot of times in this type of story, we see the female subordinate and the male boss, and there's a certain dynamic that happens there, and we can a lot of times see how that story is going to play out because of those kind of traditional boss employee roles and certain types of abuse can happen, subtle or blatant, but with both of these characters are female. What does that allow you to do in kind of adjusting those gender roles and the things that we come to expect in the office?
I think what I was quite interested in is that blurring, in a way, between an employee, and when the lines become blurred between an employer and an employee. are they friends or are they not friends? And I think I've sort of observed how women sometimes find it more difficult to present themselves as, not all women, but I have observed it in some women, present themselves as a figure of authority. And therefore they perhaps there's a sort of a pretense that they're not really that actually, Mina has this slight pretense that Christy, not that she's her friend, she would never have called her friend, but she has a sort of faux intimacy with her. And kindnesses which she does, which Christine latches onto, but actually mean nothing to Mina. But it's a show. It's a show of it. She's not apologetic, Mina, but on the other hand, she's kind of disguising the fact that she is an authoritarian figure. But she's covering it up with soft edges and domesticity and the pretense of a friendship in a way, which isn't really there. And Christine doesn't really. Christine is somebody who is hungry for that kind of, or she wants that from Mina. She likes to feel that she is close to Mina, that they do share something, or that she has a place that nobody else has.
It's this kind of twisted sisterhood. Kind of thing where the one is craving for the approval of the other, and the and Mina does these nice things, but I think knowing the agenda and knowing what she's doing that is going to affect Christine and keep her kind of baited, to do her bidding. She has a very devoted and obedient servant in Christine, and she knows how to keep her there. Yeah. Exactly. The book is fantastic. It's out everywhere now. What do you hope when people close the book at the end and they've made it through this journey? What do you hope people take away from the story?
I hope, it's difficult really, that one. That's a good question. What do I hope? I hope that, there'll be a sort of thoughts about power and power shifts and who's in charge and who isn't. And I suppose, be careful who we don't listen to. Be careful, make sure we all listen, actually. I mean, I think there is sort of something in the ether at the moment about people feeling they're not heard and they're not listened to. And I hope there is a tiny echo of that in this book.
Yeah. The book is fantastic. I love it, Renee. I love what you're doing. If people are just learning about you and want to know more about you and kind of dig into your back catalog and follow along with what's next, is there a place where they can connect with you online?
No, I'm hopeless, Hank. No. Just getting me on Skype was a challenge. Do you know, there isn't. I'm not on Twitter. I did Twitter for a very short while, but it's not for me. And I don't have a web page, and I should get one, shouldn't I?
Well, I know that HarperCollins has a page for you.
There we are then. That would be through HarperCollins.
I'll link that one up, and I'll link
Thank
up your
you,
Amazon
Hank.
page where everyone can go purchase your books. Renee, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Missing Wings by Andrea Lumen. Born with an ability the Villadi people of Madar believe make her one of the first to be blessed by God, Katrina's destiny unravels when her father is poisoned and her mother steals her into the human world to hide among those who hate her kind. In a near-fatal attempt to return home, Katrina is stripped of her wings. The poison meant to kill her father leaves him in a degenerative state. When her eldest brother discovers she has survived, he orders her to stay in hiding. She must wait, concealed in the human world, until the danger of their father's uncontrolled rages is contained. Grown and adapted to the human world, Katrina encounters one of her kind. The promise of home and the first love leads her into a situation capable of starting war among the Villadi. Will a human upbringing, mistakes, and the loss of her abilities bar her from reclaiming her heritage? Will unraveling the mystery of her mother's betrayal lead her family into an even greater danger? Missing Wings by Andrea Lumen. The Locust, Books 1-3 by Ralph Kern. The complete Locust series, an epic tale of mystery, survival, exploration, intrigue, and war. The cruise ship MS Atlantica is lost. On these strange and uncharted seas where even the compass shows the sun rising to the west, Atlantica's passengers and crew must do what it takes to survive. In Unfathomed, Atlantica arrives in a strange new world. Unable to locate land and with no way to contact home, they must find new allies, fend off relentless enemies, and discover the horrifying truth behind the Locusts. The future of humanity will be decided as the fleet confronts the architect of the Locusts. Not everyone will survive the desperate final battle. The Locust box set contains all 3 action-packed novels in this best-selling science fiction thriller series, Unfathomed, Expedition, and Osiris. Acclaimed for great characters, thrilling action, technical accuracy, and a compelling sense of mystery. Buy it today. The Complete Locust series by Ralph Kern. Thanks for tuning in to Author Stories. Find all the archives at hankgarner.com. Now, stay tuned for a special audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series.
I was walking through the woods between Wolfert's Roost and the future site of my father's Stone Manor house. The house would eventually stand on what had been old Baltus's pumpkin field, the land where I had found my grandfather's head. Father had chosen the spot for its view of the Hudson River. Knoll was to be a grand mansion in the Gothic Revival style, but at the time the mansion was but a few foundations of Van Brunt stone. I had become fond of the place already, the idea of it, and I spent many a night alone in a shack on the property. My mother disapproved. She would have me sleep in the room across from hers in our townhouse. But I was 15 and did not answer to her. I kept a bottle of spirits hidden in the crook of 2 walnut trees near old Baltus's grave. I thought he would approve of the gesture. I had stopped along my way to fetch it out. At the moment the first pull of liquor touched my throat, I heard a ghastly, inhuman laugh. I was not alone in the woods. Had God sent the horseman after me? Had I sinned that terribly? I ran through the wood and found the field where Knoll was to be built. The outline of the foundations was barely discernible beneath the snow. An apparition stood there. Though I have seen him many times since, I shall never forget my first glimpse. Gaunt in moonlight, headless, exuding power and malice. A magic thing in the land of the ordinary. The headless horseman of Sleepy Hollow. What chills those words evoke. It charged at me, hatchet raised. I stood transfixed, unable to move, unable to even imagine escape. This was the servant of God, after all, sent to strike down sinners. I hurled the bottle from my hand, ashamed that I had become a drunkard as Baltus had been. It shattered against the foundations of Knoll. I stretched out my arms and awaited judgment. A piercing white light broke the darkness. The horse reared. "Not my Dylan!" cried Agatha, appearing from the wood. She held a skull in her hand. It shone brightly as a diamond, and in that moment I understood. The horseman did not serve God, he served my grandmother. Perhaps in that moment I came to see Agatha and God as one and the same. The unholy spirit fought her command. A foreleg of the demon horse struck my head with such power that I fell backwards with a cry and knew no more. I carry the scar to this day. A slight indentation in my temple, barely noticeable. In my days of courting I was told that when I am angry the patch of insulted skull bone will stand out in a disturbing manner. I have never had occasion to see this phenomenon, however, as I am generally well pleased whenever I pass a mirror.